Thanks for having me today. It's a real pleasure to be here and lovely to be part of this. So thank you. So good question. So I did a geography degree. I went in as, I think it's fair to say, I went in as a physical geographer. So I really loved anything to do with the natural environment, whether that was geology or meteorology. Really interested in how natural systems work. And I came out as a human geographer. So I discovered a passion for urban geography specifically, and the sort of philosophy of urban space. And I got really inspired by the work that I was doing as a human geographer. And I felt it was something important for the society and communities to have well-functioning cities. So I wanted a career in that. I loved my subject. I wanted a job where I got to do that every day. So the closest thing I could find to that, and I was definitely not going to be an architect, I did not have those skills, was urban planning. So I was very lucky to get an opportunity to intern with Arup back in the early noughties, and they very kindly sponsored my training. So I did my MPhil at the Bartlett School, and that really launched my career in real estate. So for me, it's always been a passion. I've always been interested in how human beings, how societies interact with urban space on a very kind of basic and fundamental level. Like what are cities for? What is our role in shaping them? I think planning is a very diverse discipline. So I think you can come to the discipline from lots of different pathways. Personally, my pathway through geography I found incredibly useful, because the exciting and interesting about geography is how diverse it is in itself, but it teaches you about context. And it teaches you to look for and understand the intrinsic links between seemingly esoterically or separate things. There is always a link. And geography teaches you the craft of understanding those links, which I think is really important for planning, because as planners, we're not there just simply to consider the 3D physicality of space. I think people often think that's what it's about, but actually planning is about urban experience, how we create our urban lives, and the interactions on a minute level on how places work, and then on a macro level, how planning of cities and planning of urban space needs to interact with all sorts of other policy areas. So I think geography gives you that really good sense of context. Well, I started in the early noughties. It was a very exciting time to be in the urban sector. There was a huge impetus for regeneration, not least with the Urban Task Force, which published early in the decade. And that was a real manifesto for how our cities and urban landscapes needed to change. And I was a fervent supporter of that. As I said, I've always had an interest in the social aspects of urban and urban development. And I think what I've seen change is this focus of regeneration being about the physical. So needing to improve the physical urban fabric, not least because there'd been decades of decline in de-investment in urban space, but also to raise the economic productivity of place. And whilst those two things are really, really important, I gradually, as the sort of decade wore on, felt that what was missing was the social aspects. And obviously the index of deprivation and things like the single regeneration budget was all about looking at place and what that place needed. I still felt there was a disconnect between how are we actually transforming people's lives and how are we engaging people in that conversation and in those decisions. So in 2010, when the coalition government started to talk about big society, I felt that was my kind of green light for looking at how I could contribute more to helping communities, helping local people shape those local decisions. And 12 years on, MEND is still heavily involved in that. So for me, it has been about having that community oversight in decision making in the urban sector. And I think that's been something that, whilst it was on the kind of fringe, is now firmly in the mainstream. So we talk a lot about social value now when we didn't before. I've often thought about this. So from a kind of ideas point of view, I think Jane Jacobs, without a doubt. I was really profoundly inspired by reading The Death and Life of American Cities. That really opened my eyes to how certainly my urban studies up until that point had been very much around, the utilitarian nature of cities. What can they do for us from a sort of economic point of view? And what Jane was adept at doing is sort of peering below the surface to the sort of how we produce social life, how urban everyday life is created, and it's created by the sort of minutiae of our interactions with each other every day, our urban behaviours. And I found that really fascinating, and a very kind of undervalued aspect of how we consider and plan cities. We sort of think about them as these big machines, and we design them in a macro sense without really thinking about, well, what's it like to actually be in this space? How do people live? And how do we make that better, rather than expecting our social life to sort of shoehorn into this big system that we've created. So she really inspired me. Other urban thinkers that I kind of came across through my studies and that would really propelled me to think I want to be in the urban sector, with the likes of Henri Lefebvre, who talked about the philosophy of urban space as what is it physically and mentally, how do we conceptualize urban space and what it's for, and Edward Soja, a very prominent postmodern urban thinker, who talked about how when we talk about history, we always discuss it in spatial terms, we never talk about it in social terms. And he applied that to urban studies and was one of the first to do that. And his writings about Los Angeles and how Los Angeles developed is fascinating. So a big hero of mine. And then from a kind of work point of view, I owe a debt of gratitude to quite a few women actually, and men in the sector. So Helen Dias, who gave me my big break at Arich, took a total chance on me. So she's wonderful and a great role model in the industry. Jackie Sadek, one of the most amazing women in the urban sector, a great speaker, a great thinker, and has shaped policy over a number of decades. And Corinne Swain, the late Corinne Swain, she pioneered the development of Arab economics and planning, and is one of the most amazing pioneering women in planning in the UK. I definitely admire those women, and lots of other younger women in the industry who are really sticking their necks out and being really quite prominent in how they approach diversity and inclusivity by setting up their own networks. I'm really full of admiration for that. That is something that I did later in life, and as a young woman setting out in the sector, it takes a lot of courage to do that. So Urbanistas, I started that back in 2012. I did that on the back of setting up Men's sort of about 18 months earlier. And that was something that I had no real experience setting up a business, certainly didn't have any investment. It was very much a sort of, I just feel a real strong urge to do this. I feel like it's the right time. So I took the plunge, and I'm very glad I did. But in the course of doing that, I encountered so many amazing women who were so generous with their time, with their enthusiasm and support, who had fantastic ideas of their own. And I always came away from those encounters feeling really inspired, really energized. And certainly over the course of the 10 years prior to that, I'd met the likes of Helen and Corinne and Jackie, who'd really massively inspired me. The one thing I noticed though was that I was meeting them one-to-one. I wasn't seeing as much of them out there. So was I reading about them? Was I seeing them at conferences? Was I hearing about their ideas? Was I reading their articles, yes and no, but nowhere near as much as they deserved. You know, these women are amazing and they have great ideas. So I sort of thought, well, rather than wait for something to come along, I invited them to sit around the table with me to see what would happen, just to see what this kind of clash of brilliant ideas and this kind of combination of great women from all aspects of the built environment, and outside the built environment too. And it was amazing. It was a really inspiring couple of hours. In fact, it took a couple of hours to go around the table and introduce everyone. And it was just lovely to see the connections that the women had with each other and each other's work, how they chimed with each other, how there was just a really sparkling atmosphere. And I thought, well, God, you know, there's nothing else really out there like this, and it's just such a simple idea. So we agreed we'd definitely like to do it again. And fast forward 10 years later, here we are. The premise of Urbanistas is to provide this platform for women to amplify their ideas for making cities better for everyone. And like I say, it isn't confined to women working in the built environment. Actually, we need everyone and everything to make a city. So actually, it's way broader than the built environment, and that gives us such a richness of content and ideas and backgrounds and skill sets. So what we ask women to do is come with an idea, and that idea is designed to blend your sort of personal values, your personal passions, with your professional skill set. And the idea is that the women in the room and their wider networks, including men, are there to then help. And so it's really important for the person bringing the idea to have a strong sense of what they need, so to have an ask. They make their ask, and it's then up to the women in the room to sort of contribute their ideas or their support on how they can take that idea forward, and then take it outside the room, so to follow up, to enable, and to support. So it's based on the power of collaboration and volunteering. I'm really proud to say that, you know, Urbanistas is powered purely on that volunteer and enthusiasm and spirit. We've exported this model across the world. So we've got chapters in Australia, across Europe, we've got one in America, and it just keeps thriving. We're always being asked to support the growth of new chapters. And I think the beauty of it is its simplicity. It's there to support, not to own anything. And we receive no funding or sponsorship. We're completely independent. So yeah, it's been a really lovely journey to be on, and we've seen chapters grow and change. They reflect the diversity and uniqueness of the place they're in, the city they're based in. And certainly within London, I think we're on our 5th generation of chapter leads. So we encourage women to come forward to take the lead on looking after the chapter, running the chapter, maintaining the network, running the meets. And that in itself helps to grow the leadership of those women. So yeah, it's been fabulous. If I was talking to myself sort of 20 years ago, I would say to myself, try not to conform to anything or anyone you think you need to be. So I definitely did that to start with. I definitely I see myself as a slightly quirky. I don't necessarily fit in any particular, how do I put it, box. And I used to think that was terrible. I used to think, gosh, I've really got to be better at this or be more like that. And over the years, I've realised, no, that's actually just how I am, and I've embraced it. I've embraced that sort of, I'm not necessarily conforming to the norm in how I think and how I work. I'm very independent. I'm an introvert, and I think quite differently, and those are good things. So I wish I kind of understood myself a bit better. So I would urge anyone starting out in the sector to just do some introspection, look at how your personality type, your work style, how you engage with others, do some behavioural type work, and because that will arm you with the knowledge of how you prefer to work, how your strengths can be supported and recognised, and your weaknesses, with inverted commas, because can be turned into strengths. So self-awareness, really important. network as much as possible. And when I say networking, I don't mean formal corporate style networking where you have to get the ticket to an event. Networking can happen anywhere. If you're interacting with other human beings, you're networking. So take every opportunity to do that and create opportunities. Now, it probably sounds strange me saying that as an introvert, but I find interacting with other humans can be quite draining sometimes. So, it takes a lot of energy. So to get the best out of it, you should aim to engage with people as informally as possible. So I mean, when you're on the bus, when you're at a shop, you're interacting with other people all the time, and you can hone your networking skills, you can hone your communication skills that way. Don't feel you've always got to do it in these formal settings. Create your own networking opportunities. And again, I don't mean invite 100 people to a room. Ask people for coffee, accept opportunities for coffee, talk, because it is all about building your confidence. Writing will be important whatever job you do. And growing your writing skills, I would say it's also top of my list of skills to have for any person starting out in the industry. And again, you can practice your writing every single day, whether it's writing an email, whether it's sending a text. I'm one of those people, I use punctuation in my texts. I write them out as if they're really formal pieces of writing, because that's how you learn how to write. And if you can write, you can pretty much access any sector you like. Writing skills are really, really, really sought after and really, really valuable. And they help you express yourself, communicate better. And also something that I feel really strongly about, and I don't think is emphasized enough, especially, I don't know, maybe it is in higher education. I've not been there for a long time. Creating your own personal brand. And I don't mean having a trademark, having a logo or anything, but just having a sense of who you are, what you offer to other people, what you're about, and creating that little narrative and identity for yourself. Writing, it would really help with that, have your own sort of voice and channel for communicating your identity. Well, the answer to that question is I didn't. So I was absolutely terrible at this until fairly recently. So starting a business that my work-life balance went out the window. You're responsible for absolutely everything. That's bringing in work, doing work, finding more work. So I definitely overworked myself, and I definitely got burnout. And then sort of now I've got children and still running business, so I have to keep clients happy, and it takes on a different level of juggling. So again, I would be rubbish at carving out time, putting in boundaries, all those things that help you maintain the space that you need individually, so me time, but also enable you to sort of feel like you can dedicate time to your kids and other activities without feeling guilty, without constantly looking over your shoulder, checking your phone, your watch, like, oh, I've got to do something else. So I would say I was absolutely rubbish at that until COVID came along. And it opened my eyes to actually life is too short, one thing. I learned how to meditate. Well, I shouldn't say I learned how to meditate. I'm learning how to meditate. I think it's a lifelong thing. But that gave me some real kind of insights into how my brain really needs to sort of have a bit of downtime instead of running constantly 100 million miles an hour. So that helped me get a bit of perspective. And just being at home and around kids, it really makes you realise that, you know, there's only a certain amount of time you have with them until they get older and they don't want to hang around with you anymore. So that taught me to sort of really focus and be clear about what my boundaries are, actually work out what they were in the first place, stick to them. I'm not saying I'm perfect at it by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm certainly better. And I know now where the red flags are, which is when I'm feeling tired and grumpy, I give time out for myself. But I think in any stage of your life, it doesn't, you know, not necessarily kids, everybody's got pressures on them. And again, I go back to my point about self-awareness, not needing to conform, having a brand. That means it's all about you and what you need. And that's really, really important, because it's very easy to feel like you've got to answer that email at 9 o'clock at night, or you've got to be the last person to leave that networking event. You've got to look after yourself.